Good morning and welcome to the first ever Humanity in Practice podcast. I will be your host, Catherine McCord. I could not be more excited about launching this show. This is a love project between myself and my co-creator, Sheree Crow, who will actually be here with us today. I'm very excited about that. This show is going to be a nonpartisan communication of ideas and ways to move our world forward and evolve society. This is all about bringing diverse ideas together, having differences of opinion, and finding a way to collaboratively move forward in a way that advances humanity. And thus, hence the name Humanity in Practice. So, without further ado, I'm very excited because today's topic is education. I think that's where it all starts. And so, I was very excited when one of my close personal friends, one of my favorite human beings on the planet, decided to join us for this episode. I'm going to go ahead and bring her on. Um, the a wonderful, the incredible Dr. J. Here she is. And then also, again, I'm so incredibly excited to welcome my co-creator for this show, the wonderful Miss Sheree. Welcome.
Hello.
And so, ladies, if you could start off by introducing yourself a little bit. Sheree, I'm going to let you go first since you helped create this show.
I'm Sheree Crow. I'm a former teacher. I was teaching 18 years and I taught abroad in Germany and Finland and in the US and Texas. And so I feel like this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I would think so. And Dr. J, tell us about you.
Dr. Jerri Johnson. I'm a 20 plus year educator. I've taught in the United States only, soon to be maybe in Dubai. We'll talk about that later. But I've also, I do professional development and consult training teachers, principals, district administrators now. So I've done everything from classroom to district office administration in the states of Missouri and Texas.
That's awesome. And so we have people here with a wide variety of experience in education. I am not officially an educator. I teach classes to do professional development, and I grew up around educators, but I am not an educator. So I'm very excited to hear what you two have to say about this. And I think having the international perspective will be super interesting for this too. So why are we discussing education? Why is it the first topic that we're hitting? Well, again, I personally feel like that's where it all starts, right? Is the education process. But also there's some interesting facts that I do want to throw out there. Um, so currently we are, according to the National Center for Education, they had an article come out on January 28th that said that there has been a 2.7 million drop in public school enrollments, or there will be, excuse me, over the next 7 years. So over 2.5 million kids are expected to, or the enrollment expected to drop. And that's nuts. Like losing student population is absolutely crazy. We're also seeing that 98 schools, public schools, closed in the 2023-2024 year. That's insane. And again, that's according to the Center for National Education. And then also, I thought this was really interesting. So Deloitte just put out an article on April 17th that shows that there is a 50% reduction in confidence in U.S. higher education since 2015, and that only what they call the best colleges or the Ivy Leagues are the only ones seeing a peak in enrollment. The rest are having a significant dip. So I think that's really interesting. So less people are confident in the education system, including higher education and also primary. That's fascinating. So let's start with you, Jay. Why is that?
Well, what I'm seeing as I go to schools across the country is that it's a funding issue. Um, the services that are provided or not being provided to students that are needed for support for students are not there because of the funding. And then also just the fact that we're losing teachers, like we're losing educators left and right,
Yeah.
because the field of education is not very, I guess a lot of people, it's not really, they don't want to go into it because they're
Yeah.
not getting paid enough. They feel like they're not getting paid enough.
And I
Our
think there
educators
are there
just
other issues too. Like, okay, Sheree, you're the perfect one to ask about this because you were an educator, you got out of it.
Mhm.
What other reasons do you feel there are for people not wanting to be in the profession? Why are we losing teachers?
Well, the student behavior, people are afraid to blame students because they're afraid it relates back to the parenting, because parents are now working and they're also on the computer, on their phones and not paying attention. I read some studies before I left. I continue to keep up with the trends because I feel like I wanted to be a teacher my whole life and that was all I ever wanted to be. And then when I found out how much my retirement was going to be, I had to make another plan. That was the first thing. I was broke.
Wait, let's pause on that. The retirement plan was a big factor for you. So why? Like what?
They told
What
me
about it?
I was 18 years. They told me I had 10 more years to retire and I would get $1,200 a month.
Ooh,
And so I thought that was really bad.
that
And
is
then,
pretty.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it
And,
is. Is that standard, Jay? Is that a standard amount?
Not well, it depends on the state and it depends
Okay.
on the retirement system. Some states have better retirement systems than others. In St. Louis in Missouri, for example, the county schools had a better retirement system than the city urban demographic schools. So they had two separate retirement systems. So it really depends on where you're teaching.
Okay.
in Texas, that's where I taught. The state, they've mismanaged our retirement funds for teaching, and they haven't invested any more further. They've been trying to invest whatever little bit of money they're willing to spend on education to teacher salary, and then they're trying to shift it away, and they're saying it's not going to affect it, which these vouchers, which it is proven going to affect it even further. But I just personally couldn't take the risk anymore. I had to find something else. In addition to, my student loans were not forgiven after a promise of 10 years teaching. I applied for forgiveness during the previous 45 administration. They changed the rules without telling anybody. And when I applied, they said for 2 reasons, I don't qualify. I was on the wrong plan. And then my teaching overseas didn't count, even though I was teaching Americans mostly in American schools. They said it didn't count, which when I left, they said it did count. So they changed the rules consistently on teaching. They moved the mark, so you can't get it. So I had 2 master's degree in education, and they didn't pay for any of it, and they didn't even pay me what I was worth.
And let's talk about that, because you made a good point again. So the salaries, as we all know, I think it's kind of a universal acceptance that teachers are not paid enough, right? I don't think I've heard anyone argue against that. At least not in my experience, and I've had this conversation quite a bit. So teachers' salary, and they are low. And there are different arguments as to why and all this. But factually, if you compare them to other degreed professionals, they are on the lower end of things. I've done the research on the Fortune site and Bureau of Labor Statistics, things like that. So they are paid low, factually. Then you add into that they're being told, and I do know this to be true for other teachers as well, Sheree. It's not just your experience. I've heard other teachers talk about that they were told that they would get reimbursement for their school or be forgiven their student loans, and then it didn't happen.
Yeah,
and
mine hasn't happened either.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay. So so we're telling them, so they're also having the bait and switch, right? Like you're being told one thing's going to happen and then it doesn't. So now you have all this debt and you're not being paid enough and you're not being supported when things go crazy.
The insurance got worse over the years. When you get a raise, the insurance goes up automatically. So it's like you don't get a raise. I know people who have families, teachers, they're paying like single parents with like a single teacher mom with 2 kids pays like $1,200 a month. Right?
Oh yeah. I've seen that as well. And so you have, I mean, insurance costs a lot for everybody, right? So you have all these expenses, the debt, all that, and then you're not supported when things, and I've heard, I was just speaking to a SPED teacher not long ago, special education teacher, and who was saying that again about the not being supported in the system. So like if a student does something even to you, this person was physically assaulted.
That's what happened to me.
And somehow he was the one reprimanded, not the student. And I'm like, what?
I got pushed down the stairs by a student and I asked to press charges, and then the school police did not press charges, and I never heard what happened to the student. And I kept asking and insisting, and nothing ever happened to the student.
Wow. And so now you're not safe
No.
So why would you sign up? Like, what sane person would sign up for this job?
That's the thing. Like, it's people who actually love kids. Like, it's
Yeah.
people who actually want to make a difference in kids' lives that are still in this profession and still doing the work every day at what I call ground zero. That's
Yeah.
why the school principal safety was that was my top priority. Not just physical safety, but emotional, mental. And it's not typical. Like, that's not necessarily the norm.
Right.
But with the framework that our educators are working within right now, it's super stressful,
Yeah.
highly stressful,
Yeah.
and highly, they're just expecting a lot from educators every day to educate as well as raise children.
And they keep throwing these teacher competitive salaries. You can get higher ratings, and if you do all this stuff that they lay out for you that like highly qualified teachers should do, you can get a higher salary. But the reality is not fit with that. They don't have enough money in the district to pay all the teachers for the hard work that we're actually doing and improving test scores. I taught all my life second language learners mostly. I worked with long-term ELs, which are students who've been in the U.S. their whole life but still aren't reading on level, and I would bring my kids up every year. My levels test scores were highest in the district of Dallas many times. And my neighbor who taught GT, gifted and talented, or pre-AP kids would get the $100,000 a year salary, and I could never make mine. I did publications. I presented at conferences. I did everything they wanted me to do, and I still didn't make the same amount of money as the woman who taught the gifted and talented kids next to me.
And so let's talk about that, because that's something else that I found a lot in my research. So number one, and this is just factual, that right now, and this exact figure came from Education Weekly in an article that they published just about a week ago. We have just lost 6.8 billion in federal education funds, and that's not counting some other funding that has been cut. Okay, like state and all that type, but directly to education.
Yeah,
6.8 billion. So we're already not paying teachers enough. We're already seeing that for technology, that there's not enough budget to keep up. And I'm sorry, but kids need to learn on the technology that they're going to have to use when they get out in the world, right? So it's not being taken care of. And so now we've lost even more funds.
Mhm.
And that's unbelievable to me. And one of the things, though, that I found, so I researched on multiple sites, right, and just kind of dug and Deloitte and Education Weekly, and there was one called the Reason Foundation and all this. And one of the things that I found very interesting is that consistently the schools that are being shut down and the programs that are being shut down are specifically aimed at kids that have challenges,
Mhm.
whether it be learning English, whether it be SPED, whether it be just not being gifted and talented, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But and even down to the racial demographics, which that's a whole other conversation we could dive into. But it's really interesting to me that instead of putting money with the group that needs it the most, we're putting money over here with those that are already thriving. And I wanted to get your opinions on that. Jay, I want to start with you. What is your thought about, and that's always been the case, right? The schools that get the most funding are the ones that get the highest test scores, even though that doesn't actually mean anything.
Right.
So what is your thought about that?
I mean, the education system is doing what it was meant to do in the United States of America.
I can talk a little bit about what I saw happen in Finland when the public started getting unhappy about the public schools. Like
Yeah, let's hear it.
Please do. I love the schools there. Yeah.
Okay. So as you know, Finland is the happiest country in the world, and they have the top schools. There's other reasons I studied, because I did a master's degree and a master's thesis studies with second language learners of English in Finland, right? Whose parents moved to Finland who spoke English from other English-speaking countries, and they weren't meeting those students' needs either. But that wasn't even a large population. But what I learned when I was there was that the local community makes the curriculum. So the parents who live in that city, the schools are run by the city, and the curriculum is set by the local city. So the parents will meet and agree upon, we want our kids to learn physics. No, we don't, because we're a farming community. There's no standard state curriculum. There is a federal curriculum, which is minimal. Like, they have to learn to add, subtract, You know, like the curriculum is not even history. Like, okay, they have to have world history, but it's up to the local what they want to learn. So it's very localized, and the parents have more say. And then the parents also have more I would say responsibility, because there's a system that everybody, one national system that everybody, every teacher and every parent accesses, and the parent is expected to check it. And if they don't, there's a social worker calling them, why aren't you checking your system and checking in on your kids, right? And so they have to keep in track of the kids' grades and all of that. So the parents have a heavy responsibility, which we don't have here. We don't have the heavy responsibility. I had to write a master's thesis for my master's in Finland. I had to write a paper, a 10-page paper about this very thing, about the differences in the US. Is one of the things was the parents don't have any responsibility to raise the kids like they do in Finland. The free education, I mean, the free healthcare has a big center on the schools there, because there's a doctor in every school. So the parents don't have to take their kid out of school to go to the doctor. So that's they can get like general sickness, health, and all that. So, and a nurse, a registered nurse and a doctor work together to give regular checkups to the kids.
So let's pause on this, because you said something really interesting about parental engagement. And I do want to give a lot of grace, first of all, to all the parents out there, because our society changed very rapidly, where it became not an option for someone to stay home, right? And so I want to give so much grace, okay, and say that we are not bashing you for having to work. We are not saying we don't support working parents.
That way around the world, like in Europe, parents are having to work too. The inflation.
Oh yeah, so, it's not just here. That's what I mean. Our society as a whole has
because they have a phone, and because they have a phone, they can check Wilma 15 systems called Wilma 15 times a day, right? They can if they can check their Facebook, they can check Wilma on their kids. That's my opinion.
And so that's the thing, though. So I think having the options for parents to be able to do quick check-ins with systems like that. And as far as I know, and Jay, tell me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen a lot of systems like that here in the United States.
And there's a discipline system, so that you put the kids' discipline in there. If they're a problem, you put them in, you put them out in the hall, and the parent deals with it. Like the teachers have to
Now that's interesting.
It's getting worse now, and they're having more committee meetings. There is a school committee, and they don't take bullying whatsoever. Teachers here expect bullying, and they think it's part of the childhood, but there's a no bullying policy in Finland schools. And if your teacher sees you bullying, there's no like exception. You pull the kid to a meeting, you call the parents and say, hey, your kid is bullying, tell them to stop right now. The parents can't argue that my kid's not bullying, right? Even if the bully bullies, they can't excuse for being bullies, not excuse to bully back, right? There's just no tolerance for bullying.
So let's but hold on, I want to stay, and we'll get to the bullying thing, because I think that's super important to talk about. But with the parents and the communication, so giving it back to the parents, because you do hear parents often say, I don't want someone else raising my kids. I don't want people teaching my kids this, and that. Well, okay, but then you've got to be able to be more involved, right? So, so first giving them the tool, to Sheree's point, of having like an app or whatever, where they can just get in there and check. And then Jay, how do you feel as somebody who's been an administrator at a school? How do you feel about having the option to have parents come in and deal with their kids when their kids are acting up?
Oh, wrong with that. I used to call parents
I wish they would,
Right. I used to have a cascade of discipline like steps. The kids had 7 to 8 steps. The staff had 7 to 8 steps before anybody got to my office. So what the first step was communication with the parent in some way, shape, or form. The teacher, they had to talk to the teacher before they called me. Like that was the first question I would ask them. Have you spoken to the teacher about this issue? I'm not in the classroom. The teacher knows what's going on with this situation, not me. That hasn't come to me yet. Right. You need to talk to them. And I would tell teachers, you have the right to ask them to come to the school so that they are not suspended. Like, that they don't have to go to in-school suspension. They can come to the school. We have a parent liaison and a room that they can take them into and say whatever they need to say or what have you, and they can go right back to the classroom. Just know that student is coming back to you.
And
that parent deals with them.
Thing that's very different about European classrooms and Americans, the teachers they're specialists in their content. They're expected to have a master's in their content. They're not specialists in psychology or specialists in discipline. And so the systems are set up to where there's a school social circle that if there's a discipline problem, the parent comes up, meets with the administrator. The teachers are not dealing with any. I've been told so many times, if the kid acts up, it's your fault. You're not classroom management. When I was mentoring some students at the Helsinki University, English teacher program, and I was helping them. And they said, I learned more from you about classroom management than I did Finnish teachers, because Finnish teachers don't get trained on discipline or classroom management because they are the specialists in the content. The school committees, which are psychiatrists, doctors, all of this are where they're referred to if they're having discipline problems in the classroom. We're not specialists.
I think that's brilliant.
That's not happening in every school in the U.S. Like, no, and I think one school where I had a social worker and I had, a behavior specialist and things like that. But that was because that was a school of improvement.
A's one. You have, how many kids you have, and many. So if there's like 1 year you have 15 problem kids, you might have 6 that year. In the school, counselors or psychiatrists travel among the schools to the which ones.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So see, because I think that's an incredible benefit, because it keeps the teachers doing their job and not being distracted.
Because I felt like I was doing that. I was stopping fights. I was fighting this and that. The parents should be fighting. I became their parent, and I wasn't parenting the way they wanted to. And also, either this or that, or you're yelling, you're hurting their feelings. You can't give candy. You can't give stickers. This is stupid. And no matter what you tried, it was always like somebody was criticizing your discipline. So teachers a lot of times don't know what to do. And then you have teachers who have good classroom management because they have good kids, So I don't know.
So that was weird. I just got kicked out. It was very odd.
And now you're on another screen. So
I am. I'm just being moved all the way around.
So the teachers are the ones that are being expected to do everything and fix every society problem in the U.S. Yes. And it just can't continue.
And it doesn't work. It does not work.
No. Let's continue.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
I totally agree. And that's why I think as school leaders, when you find leaders who want to take that from teachers and lighten the load for teachers, that really makes a difference in school culture.
And removal from the classroom is a thing that needs to happen that's not. And I said to myself, the moment you become aggressive or don't do what I say, and I've done my thing, like, okay, I had a behavior management contract with my students, right? The moment I've done my 3 steps that we agreed on, remove them. Don't bring him back until the parent has come up, until you've agreed on a plan. And that's where the free healthcare comes in Finland, is because if the student has a mental issue, the school is not dealing with that. There's no sped accommodation for the school to deal with the kid's mental issue. And that's what we're expected to do in the school too. The parent is not, I don't want my kid to take medication. I don't want my kid in therapy. So the school is expected to deal with all these mental health issues. Yeah. We're not qualified to do that. So that we are going to have to really reevaluate. Now, Texas is doing that when they're saying teachers can do different things for discipline in schools, because we have to think differently. We have to include teachers and administrators cannot, or not psychiatrists. We can't, under the SPED guise, we cannot any longer be expected to.
All right, everybody. Sorry about that. Of course, with episode 1, we're going to have some technical issues. Why not? It's just how it goes. So we are back and just going to kind of pick up the conversation talking about the psychological support in schools for students, for teachers, letting parents kind of be more involved in that process. So my question is, for the US, knowing how very different how very specific our school systems are and all of this, Jay, I'm going to start with you on this. Where do you see the opportunity for an app or something like that to allow people to be more engaged with their kids while in school? And how would you see somebody like a psychologist or a counselor fitting into the system to help keeping everybody healthy, to support education and that type of thing?
Well, I think that there are certain online apps that schools use, like Class Dojo and things like that, for teachers to be able to communicate with parents real time about issues that are going on in the classrooms, or principals to be able to put out, different things on the app as well. So there are things that are being done right now, but it's just not being at the level of what Sheree is talking about. Like,
the fact that it's nationalized, when my kid moves to another school, it's the same. It needs to
Right.
be the Department of Education could do something like this to support all the schools and say, put your discipline problems here or your questions for the parent. This could be like the communication mode for every state, and the states can adopt it or not, but it would be good if they really could, because that way the parent moves from Texas to Georgia. It's still the same. They don't have to learn something new. And in a stressful situation, like I'm homeless or I'm jumping in my car and running to live with my friend here, I don't have time to figure out what's going on with my kid, but it's the same across the state.
Yeah,
think
and
that's
it's not.
important.
It's very individualized right now because our states are very individualized with education, right? So it's almost like what Sheree is saying. It's got to be a national like movement of the same system for parents to be able to access and it be consistent. Just like we're asking parents for consistency in being involved, we need to have consistent systems
Right.
across our country.
Agreed. I completely and totally agree. I think that it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense in business. It doesn't make sense in society. It doesn't make sense in education to have everything be so wildly different when you move within the same country from here to here to here. Now, and so I think that's a beautiful idea, Sheree and Jay, to have a consistent system across the country that allows parents to participate, elevates mental health and wellness and all of that. And especially right now, I think we're learning that, your mental wellness matters and your ability to function as a human. So especially with kids, making sure that they, who knew, making sure that they can be in a healthy place when they come to school, especially those who are going through something at home so that they can still learn. I think that kind of support would be really wonderful. So then the next thing that I want to kind of hit on, talking about this idea of consistency. Our education system seems to be, from my research, my experience, all that, very wildly inconsistent in terms of expectations. And even when it comes to different groups, even in the same school, there is just such wildly different expectations. And so, and y'all, Jay, we've had the conversation about how I feel about standardized tests, and I think they're utterly ridiculous and serve no real purpose. But other than discrimination and false senses of ability, but let's talk about how can we standardize but still keeping that individual, because everybody learns differently, right? So how can we standardize while also keeping the sense of individualism? And I'm going to kick this one over to you first, actually, Sheree. What's your idea of how to support, let's say, neurodivergent kids with different, disabilities, that kinds of thing, while also, and even just different learning styles, kinetic, visual, and auditory, while also ensuring consistency?
In Europe, they don't talk about that as much because the system is set up to for several fail safes for every student, no matter where you are in life. Those committees, those, the teacher is not expected to do the things that they're not qualified to do. I feel like I don't have to know that you need this because I have freedom to do in the spot, in the moment, because I'm using my intuition to help the student, or I can't help them, so I can refer them to the school psychiatrist or talk to the principal first. They have the committee meetings, and so you feel like you have more of a team. So I feel like it's hard because they're pulling our education system apart instead of putting it together and investing in it, like these charter schools. And I worked at a charter school one time, a really large one, and I thought they did stuff that was against my personal ethics to these students, making the girls wear big red A on their black shirt and sit in the back of the room in the lunchroom when they acted up. I worked at an all girls school, and I thought that would not work in a public school, but it worked there, and the parents they accepted it. Like, this is the punishment we do, that we isolate the girls with a big red A on their shirt. Right. So charter schools can do stuff that regular public schools couldn't do, and we wouldn't be able to do. So I always feel like until we're going, it's like backwards thing, almost like you think of these little village remote schools where the old lady teacher hits you with a ruler and stuff, like we're going backwards in many ways instead of putting our money into improving in mental health. And so they're saying it's not working, so we're going to pull it apart. So I just feel like still investing in public schools is really important at this time where they're pulling it apart.
I agree. So what I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Sheree, is investing in creating these teams, these symbiotic teams where you have the teacher, the admin, the administrator, the counselors, all these different people.
The SPED department, because that comes with its own oh my God, I have to have an ARD. Oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do this. But this, because every teacher, most teachers I've ever met are in it because they want to help kids. I don't know teachers that are in it to just hurt kids. So the idea that they think they have to have all these safeguards from teachers is really ridiculous, because
I agree.
we are in it because we want to help kids. And I know I've seen that with kids. Fitness teachers have no safeguards like that. They don't have anything like that. They don't. When I went there, they're like, special ed, what's that? But the kids' reading is high. Their math is high, regardless of who you are, because of those systems and that medical care and that mental health support.
And I think that that's the thing, you know, and so having the mental health support and having the team, so that the teacher's not just out on this freaking island having to do all these, like you said, that they're not qualified to do, that's not what they're qualified to do. And I'm also curious, Jay, I'm going to kick this one to you. How does, you know, where do we bounce? Because I do agree that having these teams sounds spectacular, right? That just kind of makes sense to me. It's just like in a company, you have somebody that does operations, somebody that does sales, somebody that does HR, right? It just makes sense. So how do we also make sure that the teachers have enough information to support, you know, the different learning styles, to recognize, oh, this is where I need to stop and get a little help, you know, because you might have a kid that's doing something. You're like, what is this? Why are they not understanding? I always go back to, and Jay, I've sent you this video before, the Hannah Gadsby routine about how she broke her teacher. It's called Am I Made of Box, for anyone that wants to look this up. And the basis is that she's sitting there asking all of these just off the wall questions about, you know, trying to learn about prepositions. And she's actually trying to engage, but it's making her teacher insane.
Yeah.
And so, and what it turns out it is that she has autism, right? She gets a diagnosis later in life. Well, you know, so how do we support teachers to know, okay, I'm not doing this in a way this child needs. Now I need to get a little help. How do we kind of balance that out?
That's a fantastic question, because that is really kicked down to the school principal most of the time. Like, okay. I was in charge of, if I had a teacher, for example, I had a first year teacher that I had, and 14 out of her 21 kids had IEPs. Okay. 14, her first year of teaching.
And what's an IEP for anyone watching that does not know?
An individual education plan. Okay. They were all special as education students, 14 out of 21 in her classroom. And I came into the school. She was a first year teacher, already hired. She had at least 3 kids in her classroom that were autistic, on different ends of the spectrum. Okay. She had never dealt with this. I had never had this many kids in one classroom that way. And I didn't want to split them up. She was a strong first year teacher. I had to then say, I need to make sure that she goes to an ABA training and things like that. I sent her to several trainings throughout the beginning of the year.
Okay.
I wanted her to be supported in that way. I had to determine that. Nobody at district office said, Johnson, you need to, help her with this. The classes were done before I got there, because I'm a new principal coming into this new school, right? So I had to deal with that. Many times the school administrator is the person that's supposed to pick that out.
Okay.
And get the support for the teachers that they need. We had several trainings throughout the school year regarding autistic students, because we ended up having about 8 to 9 of them within our school. I needed all teachers to understand, as they interacted with these students throughout the day, what they were seeing and how they needed to deal with it. Because I didn't want one teacher, reprimanding a student for what is normal behavior.
Yeah, what is perfectly healthy, just different behavior. Yeah.
But because they're in another grade level and they see them in the hallway doing something or in the bathroom doing something, they decide to reprimand them. So I needed all staff to understand what autism looks like, what the student is going through, how do we support the students and things like that, because you never know if they were going to the next teacher's classroom.
So let's hit on. So I hear a lot of the teachers need the support, right? And so it sounds like what's been happening is, number one, there's not teams. It's all kind of been thrust onto admin and to teachers, and they're just kind of on their little islands. I'm hearing that we need to start using technology more in education, and you having these apps that allow, and so not just for the students, which they absolutely need to be learning on.
I don't
on
agree with
better
education.
technology.
In the classroom, we need technology more.
Yeah,
I
exactly. 100%. 100%. We need laptops. We need apps for the parents. We need all the technology to come into school. And what I'm hearing is investment is very much needed. That instead of defunding, we need to be supporting with funds, because, at least in my opinion, schools have been underfunded.
Why do we have
been a thing.
instructional coaches when we need psychiatrists? In my opinion, we have the best teachers in the world. I'm telling you, I've been all over the world. American teachers are the best teachers in the world from what I've seen. We know more about pedagogy, all of that. After I lived abroad, I thought that we must have just bad teachers, but no, we have the best teachers in the world, and it's not reflected on that because we're given too much, in my opinion. I left there going, oh my God, what we're doing.
I think it's overwhelmed. And just like you see it within organizations, I think that teachers have overwhelmed because they're being given things that are not their expertise, and it doesn't make sense. It's just like when you see somebody who's an admin who's given HR work. Well, obviously they're not going to thrive because they're having to do these things that they don't have expertise in, right? Then they're not able to do their actual job and thrive in that. And it just kind of snowballs. So the last thing I want to kind of ask you ladies about before we wrap up is, excuse me, when it comes to standardized tests, because, and y'all know it's one of my bugaboos, standardized tests, and growing up with educators who felt the exact same way. I hear the argument a lot. Well, then how do we tell, if we take away standardized tests, then how do we know that students actually know what they're doing, and how do we determine where funding goes? So I'm going to split this question into two. We're going to start with, if we don't have standardized tests, how do we know that students are actually learning anything? And I'm going to kick that one over to Sheree. That one's for you.
Well, because I lived abroad and I saw different ways of standardized testing, it can happen at certain levels, and not every freaking year. And it's for a certain purpose, like determining where they go. Like, for instance, to trade school or to real school, or to, okay, this kid needs to stay back in a grade, or whatever your system.
So it's not so much not having them, it's using them appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. At the appropriate
graduation
time.
In Finland, you only have two standardized tests, and it's basically when you graduate from the 9th grade, which is going to high school or not, if you're going to a trade school or whatsoever, to see where to put you. That's basically it. You have two standardized tests in your life, and to go to college after you graduate, your matriculation exams. And so that makes sense. That makes sense. And teachers do their own little, they take this seriously too. I want my kids to do well on these tests, not because it's reflected on my name, but because I'm in this because I want to do this.
Because they care. Yeah, right? They care.
But the fact that they think the worst of teachers in America is really bad to me, because the fact is I'm very educated, I'm very high achieving, and I'm somebody you'd probably want to run your corporation, but I'm in this classroom because this is where I want to be, right? They think badly of us. Their ideas.
Oh no, I think teachers are incredible. Right? Yeah, I think teachers are incredible. They just need to be, like you said, allowed to teach. That's what it needs to be. They need to be allowed to do their dang job, and not have to babysit, and not have to do all this other nonsensical stuff. And also, I think it stifles teachers to have to constantly prep for these tests all the time. Like, I mean, I remember going through schools, and at one point, your education just becomes prepping for these tests, and that's it. And there's nothing else.
Parents had more to say locally. Say the parents was a town of factory workers, and they wanted their kids to learn how to, I don't know, use some kind of machine. What if they could set their own standardized tests for their local community, and not something that's dictated by the state, but it's a local point that we want our kids to know calculus because it helps with this, with our MIT thing or whatever, whatever.
Right. And I think it does. I don't know. I have concerns on that method too, but I do see the value in it. I think that adjusting to where parents have more of a say and society has more of a say, not just some person sitting over there. So like, people could come in and go, you know what, you need to be teaching more tech, or you need to be teaching more emotional intelligence, or you need to be teaching more critical thinking, and not so much just the facts. You're like, how do you learn? How do you think? How do you apply? That kind of thing. And I think that kind of education is very much missing at all levels right now in our country. And then Jay, for you, let's talk about, part two of that that scenario, right? So we've got the standardized tests, and okay, maybe we do need them, but less of them and used appropriately and used a little bit differently. So then let's talk about that. So then what do we do with the funding? Because right now that's how funding is based. A lot of people don't know that. Funding is based on those test scores. It is based on, who does the best and that kind of thing. And it kind of leaves groups that struggle behind, and it's crazy. So how would you, is that correct, first of all? And then number two, how would you handle funding?
So most of school district funding is based on local taxes. So it depends on what businesses, the housing valuation, all that type of stuff. The money that actually comes from like the federal government and things like that may be more of your assessment funds and things like that. So if they just leveled the playing field, or give everybody the same stuff, like
that's what I keep
and then based on their local taxes or whatever, they utilize that money. But we're taking away money, federal funding now, and it's like now you want money to go more towards vouchers and things like that. Once again, not leveling the playing field.
I think parents would also agree to not pay property taxes if they would pay more state taxes.
Exactly.
Equally across the board.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, this is why people move their kids or try to move into, neighborhoods or whatever that supposedly have the better schools, because they're getting more of the funding based on the local valuation. So it's just like, just level the playing field. In these assessments, it doesn't matter what they do on a state assessment. All of them are biased anyway. Like, it doesn't matter. I would, even though what Sheree is saying is basically going back to, they would say tracking students. Right? A lot of people would say it's tracking students, but I don't see it as that. I see it as supporting students in becoming productive citizens and having a living wage because of the jobs or the professions that they are being trained to go into. Even corporations now are saying we need people that can think critically, work in teams, all of these soft skills that we don't give them if they have a degree. We don't care.
Right.
You can have a high school diploma to do this and we'll train you. Like, corporations are not, they're not against training people to get them to stay. Get them to stay. I don't have a problem with that. So just level the playing field with the money that you give everybody.
Agreed. And also, I want to hit on something that both of you said too, which is we need to be teaching the skills that are actually applicable in the work world. Let me tell you, as an HR expert, okay, this is what I deal with. I've been an executive. I've been in all levels. I've done everything from hiring to firing and running a company and all that kind of stuff. And let me tell you, these people are not coming out prepped for the real world. We need to be teaching critical thinking. We need to be teaching how to successfully interact with others. We need to be teaching budgeting. We need to be teaching resumes. We need to be teaching communication skills, and not just basic like reading and writing, just actual communication, how to actually relate to one another,
and because it takes so long for those standardized tests to catch up to what is the changes we need to make, we're still teaching stuff from like 5 years ago. So those standardized tests, taking them away allows the teachers to change. Like now we need AI because kids are using it and they're using it unethically. And so the curriculum needs to change, but we don't have time to do that because we're teaching stuff for this test that was written 5 years ago.
Right. So let's hit on this. So here's what we're going to summarize. Number one, education needs to expand to more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. It is time to bring humanity and the business world in practical life, learning how to pay bills, learning how to manage credit. All of that needs to become part of the education system, as does like the emotional intelligence, better communication skills, all of that. AI, right there with you, Sheree. All of that needs to come in. Technology needs to be in education, from AI to using laptops to understanding email and how all that works. All that all of this needs to be part of education. We need to be giving apps and access to parents and letting them participate more. We need to be having parents more engaged in the educational process and in also taking care of their kids. Because frankly, it's not the school's job to raise your kids. Can we just say that? Like, it is not the school's job to raise your kids.
We've been saying that, but they're not listening, and they're not going to, because there's
Right.
no reason for them to listen. So the suggestion for the state and the federal government is invest in mental health care and committees, in the schools. We're starting to talk about it now. We need more psychiatrists and psychologists and this kind of support.
150%.
Those special ed kids who are behavior problems should have a weekly therapy session with a therapist in the school.
100% mental health support in the school for teachers, for admins, for students. Everybody should be being taken care of in school, and especially these kids that need support, that type of thing. Because I'm with you, Sheree. I think that would solve so many problems, both in the educational side and for the individuals, and supporting them getting healthier, more well-adjusted humans out into the world. I think that's really, really important. And I think going into this idea of helping find a solution instead of just ostracizing the child who is, quote, difficult, right? Building that solution. So building solutions, and all of this, folks, requires money. So one of the first things we need to be doing is putting more money into schools, more investment, but letting people spend it and getting people in positions to determine spending who actually understand education and what needs to be done, like these two amazing women that I have here with me today. And with that, we're going to wrap up our first episode of Humanity in Practice. Thank you for sticking with us through our weird technical issues. Thank you for being part of our amazing first show with these two incredible, wonderful women. Real quick, each of you tell people how they can find you, how they can connect to you if they want to. Sheree, we'll start with you.
You can find me on Facebook at Sheree Talking-Crow.
There you go. There you go. And Dr. J, where can they find you and your interesting information and book and show and all this? Tell them all about you.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Jerri Johnson. You can find me on YouTube. Common Sense Co-Parenting is my podcast. And you can get to my website, which is commonsensecoparenting.com.
I love that. And by the way, do check out her book about her experiences in education that's called Imagine That. It is absolutely a trip and super fun. And it's a short read, and it's just a good time. All right, everybody. Thank you so very much for being with us for our first episode. We appreciate you. Same time, same place next week. Different topic. Be great. Bye.